Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. So, I got two formative childhood memories that shaped the dreams and wishes I later reached for as an adult. The first one is this wild, vivid memory of me running deep through the woods with my brother and a few church friends at one of our friends Juan Carlos' house in his backyard. He lived in Guilford, Connecticut, where kind of suburbia and like rural town meet. Unlike the rest of us kids, our parents couldn't afford a property like Juan Carlos. The property felt dozens of acres large, very much like he had like his own little Biltmore estate, and the Biltmore forest kind of like backed up in there. And yeah, the property was so vast with woods so dense, any incident was possible, okay? Especially when you're running, all right? And when any shenanigan is possible, you need your first responders on the job. So naturally, I was leading a very high-profile search and rescue mission. I ran for what felt like dozens of continuous straight miles. I jumped over giant boulders, hurled over fallen trees. I called for backup. I was triaging. Our friend Juan Carlos, right? We were at his house. He whipped out his like old Fisher-Price walkie-talkie set for the squad. Y'all, I'm not sure if you realize, but giving a few kids a couple of two-way radios, right, to like a ragtag bunch of kids from like the barrio, that was in the 90s, that's like, it's like life-changing. It makes you invincible, powerful. And I remember feeling tapped into something greater than myself that night. It was the night I discovered the amount of confidence and security I felt while unleashed in the woods. I remember thinking, this is the level of exploration I've been waiting for my whole life. To move and play with total abandon. This is the new normal, right? Surely my very overly protective Puerto Rican parents would let me be a free-range chicken from now on like this, right? I was probably like 8 or so. But no, that's not what it looked like, at least not most of the time. There wasn't an infinite forest for me to run through, not normally. No natural swimming holes fed by springs. We played in open fire hydrants on the street in the summertime. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Like 1, 2, 3 of you guys. Yeah, see... Those years of my childhood, I grew up in some of the more concrete pockets of New Haven, Connecticut. City-made, barrio-raised muchachita. My soul yearned for something deeper. So, you can imagine why I was so stoked when this next event took place. My second most formative childhood memory was in Jersey. I have this vivid memory of walking down the neighborhood greenway with my sister and girl cousins who lived down there. We had been walking for what felt like miles, and since it was just us tweens, no adults, I remember feeling so independent. I was so grown. I never get to wander like this back home, unsupervised, let alone a path so remote, let alone absent of men. Come on, women, give it up. It was unprecedented, okay, that we were allowed to do that. Well, we must have wandered a little too far because I remember some of my primas saying, it's getting late and we need to make it home for dinner. So in this moment, suddenly, this magical trails appears a roadblock by what looks like a big pond. And on the other side of the pond is where the trail picked back up. So what must I do? Run? But there's a pond. Dive in? Well, yeah, if I want to get to the other side, right? Well, if we want to make home on time, we have to figure out a way to cross, right? But like looks of intimidation start like darting across the group, all right? Do we tread? Do we swim? How deep is this pond anyway? Do we turn around and find an alternate route? Time was running out, but luckily I spotted a floating dock in the middle of the pond. I bravely volunteered to bring the dock over so we can all safely get across. I took charge. I even pointed out the smooth rocks over by the edge of the water so you could just like hop on the float. It's not hard, just hop on the dock, right? But we needed to act fast, I say. And don't give me that look, Jen, because we might need to take 2 trips, okay? All right, well, we made it back in time for dinner, and still buzzed from the thrill, I tell my mom all about our victory. These are some of my most profound childhood memories. And that's exactly how I recall those experiences for decades following the events. It wasn't until recently that I realized that some memories kind of imprint in your mind a little differently than reality. You see, that backyard that felt like a vast forest was probably just like an average half-acre lot on a gentle slope. No peak summit, no boulders, no site to jump off of, no mountains to see through trek. We were probably just like running in circles. And the magical greenway down the street from my tia's house, it was probably more like a dirt road, like a dirt driveway probably. And no pond, just like a muddy puddle. Certainly no floating dock to save us. I think it was just like a wooden pallet from Lowe's. But you see, the power of imagination was birthed in those memories. The birthing of an idea that the girl running through the woods with a 2-way radio in hand could be fearless and she can be heroic, right? Imagination, play, wilderness, pushing beyond whatever binary label I was supposed to present would write my next chapters. So I set off to live my destiny as a trailblazer in my home, in my church, my community, in my cultura. And for whatever reason, trailblazing for me would unfold in desert landscapes. To begin, Arizona. Who's been? Yeah. This is where an undergraduate degree in environmental studies, shout out to Mark for that ES degree, immersed me into a world of ecology and natural history. And not just an academic experience, but an existential one that where I would slowly begin to unlearn all of the social and religious conditioning that was no longer serving me. My old world faith drying up like a drought, yet a spiritual awakening beginning to sprout. Like desert poppies after monsoon rains. Transformation and all, I clung on to some things that were indispensable. Like the many letters I wrote my unborn baby nephew and in utero most of my first year at college, my sister's. I'm gonna read to you one of the journal entries I wrote him. It's like one of many. I think I wrote him a book this year. Dear baby, one of the most fascinating elements on Granite Mountain is the dirt. Something as simple as dirt here has so much dimension, so much depth. The ground looks really dry on the surface, like sand that's been cooked up by the hot desert sun. However, when you dig it up, it's dark and moist from the rains that soaked it the night before. And when you scoop it up and hold it, it molds itself to the shape of your hand. This is the only season of the year that the soil does this on Granite Mountain, when summer monsoons rain over the sky and drenches the earth. The tiny pieces of granite are so beautiful to touch and look at, as opposed to like looking at them and touching them on someone's fancy kitchen countertop. It's amazing to see a whole wilderness full of this resource in its raw state. My sister's first unborn child, my mom's first grandchild, he's 14 now. So the price of FOMO and homesickness was high at times, but I had more deserts to blaze and more ponds to cross. So 3 years later, I packed my shiny diploma and some grit into the trunk of my new graduation present, sponsored by Mom and Dad. A 2003 sports utility vehicle named after the thing I was predestined to do. A Chevrolet. Hey, who said it? Trailblazer. That's what I was doing. I went to go flex my new degree doing what most us nerds in the field that we end up doing, environmental education internship. I had arrived. The gig was in central mountains of New Mexico. So yeah, more desert, bring it on. Came with the perks of free housing on the property too. The cutest adobe-style casita surrounded by nothing but Sandia Mountain foothills, a dry forest of pinyon trees and soap tree yucca. No neighbors within a mile radius. Oof. Where's the two-way Motorola radio when you need it? No, seriously, where's the radio? This is far. If I had screamed, no one would hear me because the closest neighbor was, again, a mile away. So not for the faint of heart, I had to dig deep for the brave girl who wasn't afraid of the dark woods. Well, as it turned out, the only person who needed heroic first responding was me. There, I was in my first right out of college dream job, and I was struggling. Physical isolation, micro and macro aggressions from my colleagues, where I was the only BIPOC person in this program. Later, too, I would witness two of the most overt and explicit forms of unapologetic racism in a couple of restaurants in Albuquerque. My nervous system was shot that season, and fearlessness got harder and harder to come by in those 6 months. I was faced with a lot from my past and present to reckon with, and solitude made it worse at times. Brought to my knees, I experienced true surrender for the first time, right there on the Sandia Mountains, the native territory of the Southern Tiwa Puebloans. Thank you to those native spirits who roamed that land and aided in my surrender. The type of surrender where I had to visualize the mountain of granite around me as an entity of protection and love, nestling me in its embrace. I would literally go outside and address the darkness, scared shitless, but I'd go outside and I'd be like there, like talking to the mountain. Those were the nights I was able to access feelings of connection to myself and a higher power. I survived that place long enough to remember I could muster whatever it takes to magically transport myself across any pond and any obstacle. So, for the final chapter of my desert odyssey, I floated across this little pond some people called the Pacific Ocean, and I landed in Australia for a summer-long backpacking trip. Home of the Outback Desert and a very special sacred monolith sandstone knob that rises abruptly 1,000 feet high from its surrounding shockingly flat lowlands. The Anangu Aboriginal peoples refer to this monolith as Uluru. It would soon be my temple for several days where I camped there at the national park. Uluru is like 5 hours from the nearest major town, y'all. It's remote as hell. But I literally drove from the nearest major city. I didn't even come in from Alice Springs, which is like 5 hours. I drove in from Adelaide, which is like 16 hours away. And a couple of random travel companions I met in Australia. But otherwise, it was mostly me, no adults. I remember feeling so independent, so grown. I love when I get to wander off like this, unsupervised, a path so remote, absent of men. It was unprecedented. I was not going to make it home on time for dinner. Thank you. I wanted to, not super connected to the story, but I wanted to just add a little bit about the connection and the passion I feel not only when I'm outdoors, but especially desert landscapes tapped in something different for me. We just had one of the warmest summers and I was outside swimming like as much as possible. That kind of invigoration when you're in a cold, freshwater spring or swimming hole, like almost always awakens something in me. And so I want to finish off by reading this poem I wrote, kind of an ode to summer swimming and desert swimming holes. Wading through ephemeral waters for the first time, my nervous system feels this remembering, tethering, echoing. I've been here before, at least my soul. A past life maybe paid the toll. As I cross plains, my mind begins to mull. Am I from here? This place feels imprinted. In these creeks I hold no fear, no reservation. It's reverence I hold near. Oh.